I'm Sal Greco, and you're watching and listening to The Sal Greco Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. If you're watching us on Rumble, please hit the Rumble button and the follow button. And if you're listening on major podcast streaming platforms, please like, share, and subscribe. We have a doozy today. I'm bringing back my good friend and actually a fan favorite, apparently, of the audience, retired NYPD detective Marlon Bethel. He's got a load of analytics here. It's unbelievable in regards to this never-ending saga known as the New York City Police Department, which is in turmoil and scandal. So that's coming up on the Sal Greco Show. All right, folks, just as I promised, Marlon Bethel, the stat man from the Finest Unfiltered team. What's going on, Marlon? How you been?
What's up, bro? Thank you for having me back on again. And let's see what we can do with these charts today.
Yeah, Marlon, I got to tell you, you're a fan favorite. Your stats that you come up with, a lot of people have been messaging me. You're getting also people from the media that are asking me about your chart. So your work is finally being recognized. So I applaud you and I commend you, because it's about time people start paying attention to Marlon Bethel. And if people don't know, follow him at Fire Detective, both on Instagram and X. So I'm going to pull up this is the very first post of the day. Here is a post with a chart. And it's Marlon posted this, I think, in the last couple of days, the last 2 days. Isn't it curious how this individual, not an active officer when they were a cop, went from number 1019 in 2023, number 4113, 2022, number 5319, 2021, to the top 20 in 2024. I wonder if the elevation of Jeffrey Madry as chief of department had anything to do with it. What's up with this deviation at NYPD Brooklyn North? So, Marlon, can you explain this, what we're looking at in this chart? Because I see it says sergeant, special assignment pay, and I guess they made like 1,500 hours or something. I believe that's overtime. So, and there's a whole list of boroughs I see over and over again. So what are we looking at?
Yeah, so what we're looking at right now is the overtime for 2024. You're looking at the sergeants who have been assigned to the boroughs of the NYPD. So in the NYPD, we have each city borough, like Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens. They have a headquarters, which basically the headquarters directs manpower and resources, and they're the go-between the precincts and one police plaza. And in this case, we're looking at all the sergeants who are assigned to the boroughs throughout the city. Now we're looking at their pay. Now the top one is something that I found very interesting, that this particular sergeant who was assigned to Brooklyn North, he has the amount of overtime they've brought in this year is really substantial when compared to the other sergeants in similarly situated positions in other boroughs. Below them, you see a sergeant who worked in Manhattan South, and below that, another sergeant in Brooklyn North. And further down, you have the Bronx and Staten Island, and so on and so forth. But as you've seen, this particular sergeant raked in a lot of money, you know? Now, this particular sergeant is not working an enforcement position. We're not talking about somebody who's driving around the borough with a crime team, jumping out and grabbing guns. Okay? We're talking about someone who's primarily in an administrative role at Brooklyn North. And what's also interesting about that, like I highlighted in the tweet, is that if you look at that person's overtime throughout the years, you'll see particularly large jumps beginning at 2023 and this year. Now,
Which
that's
is what
curious.
I see. Yeah, you pointed that out because you're saying right here that they were a cop, but they went from number 1019 in 2023 to the top 20 in 2024. And the other 2 years, they were way down the list. So they were, this is very recent, this crazy jump.
Yeah. Well, this person was a sergeant, but what's curious is that how far they've jumped on that list of top overtime earners in the department. And what happened? What do we know happened in 2023 from 2023? Who took over the department? Ed Caban. And who was below Ed Caban? Jeffrey Madry. And who was rumored to actually be running the department? Jeffrey Madry. But the wormhole goes deeper than that.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
If you want to continue, Sal, I don't want to skip ahead.
So I wanted to pull this one up too because Marlon brings all the receipts, man. That's why everybody loves you. So I'm going to show this. This is the individual I believe you're speaking about, right? Sicilian Kitchen Katori.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So here's the post that Marlon put up on X. And it says, also hilarious, whoever entered her charges, I like how they used quotes. So this person here, you could tell, had a discipline case, right? And it says rate jumping. What's rate jumping, Marlon?
Rate jumping is basically insurance fraud. So basically that person kind of finagled their insurance, the address that their vehicles are insured at. Okay. Specifically, rate jumping is a term used within the auto insurance to describe like applying for insurance and listing your home address as a different address so you could get a cheaper rate. So what's interesting about this now is that that's a big deal in the NYPD. We have a lot of cops who've gotten themselves in trouble because, who wouldn't want to get cheaper insurance in New York City, right?
Oh, yeah.
You got a lot of guys who put down Staten Island, put down New Jersey as who put down Staten Island as their address, but in actuality, they're living over the bridge in New Jersey. Or other guys who may even, finagle, upstate, living in a county that's not in the assigned counties within that you're allowed to live in as a member of the New York City Police Department. So
yeah, I see this. This is crazy. See right here. It says rate jumping right there, right in the middle of the screen.
Yeah. That's very curious because that is the actual what came up. So there's a list of 2022 charges and specs for all officers in the NYPD. And that is where she falls on that list, right? So what's curious about that is you see rate jumping in quotes. But if you scroll up at the other names on the list, right, you'll see their charge as it pertains to insurance fraud or finagling their insurance. You'll see it explicitly spelled out. I have guys who've been given 30-day suspensions and dismissal probation, which is a year, which basically means the department it's basically you're suspended for 30 days. And then after that, the department says that we're watching you. So if you do anything to get in trouble again, they could literally just fire you. Okay. You're on probation for that year. Now you're finding other guys who've gotten that punishment. Even one person that I've managed to find on there who has, again, a similar charge and was given a command discipline for that. They lost 10 days. Okay. Here it is. She lost 8 days and you see her charge isn't explicitly defined on there. They have it under quotes. So that's why I thought it was hilarious because, whoever was told to input that, they probably asked, hey, what am I going to put if you don't want me to explicitly put her charges? Oh, just put rate jumping. And that person put it in quotes. Yeah. That's the only person on this list that you're going to find with quotation next to their charge. Right? So that's very curious. But the rabbit hole gets even deeper because
wider. I know. And I want to point this out is that one of the things we highlight on the show, and Marlon and John McCarr and Eric Dim have always highlighted, is that we say that the discipline in the New York City Police Department is arbitrary. As Marlon just stated, we know he knows other officers that were charged with insurance fraud and they got destroyed. Some might even be terminated. And here we go. Here's someone who has ties back to cronyism. We don't know what the ties are exactly to Jeffrey Mandry. As we know, he seems to have a plethora of women that he's surrounded himself with, and including his own wife, which I guess kicked him out of the house recently. But this woman, I don't know. I've never heard of the charge rate jumping. It sounds like the charge of uncompensated security is just made up. It's made up out of thin air. They ran with it, but now she has been charged for something that doesn't even exist on the books. That's what you're saying, and it's being treated completely different than everyone else that's ever been charged with the same sort of, we'll say, activity, because I've never heard of rate jump. That's the first time I've ever seen that.
Yeah, well, what I'm specifically saying is they're trying to hide her charges, right? I think that they protected her, okay? Because I want to know, I would love to know the exact allegations against her, because it seems to me like they not only protected her, but they tried to cover up protecting her by putting rate jumping as opposed to explicitly stating the charges that she was alleged that were alleged against her. Because you do that for everybody else on that list. You know, like I said, she is the only person on that list with quotations next to her charge.
Yeah.
I mean, when have you ever seen that?
I've never seen that. You know, and I'm going to explain something else. If you get pulled over, I believe it shows up under insurance lapse, which would mean, you know, you have to bring this person in because insurance lapse suspends your license. That's kind of the theme of the, I don't know if anyone remembers a few weeks ago, Tom Donlan's wife was arrested. And we reported here that it was actually Tariq Shepard had some kind of involvement in bringing Tom Donlan's wife back to the precinct they put her under arrest only to write a summons, apparently. But of course, he would have been notified for this because you have to notify DCPI, which was Tariq Shepard. He's the deputy commissioner of that at that time. So that whole thing seemed to be insurance lapse. Is that a summons or is that an arrest? Because I don't know, you go either way depending on how it's written. And in this instance, if you're an officer found to be an insurance lapse, I'm almost positive that would be severe penalty for that. Because I believe, and you're saying if it's a different state, because there are cops that's happened to, that's actually a crime, because then you go in New Jersey's law is different than New York. So you're only pointing out what we're thinking the same thing is that she's being treated different than everyone else, basically. That's what we're seeing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, there are other officers on that document. And by the way, I'm going to post links to that document on Twitter. So by the time you're watching this, you'll be able to check it out for yourself. But there are other officers on there whose charges have been explicitly detailed on it. Okay. But why is it they use an insurance term instead of explicitly spelling it out? You know? It's pretty simple. If you're not using your correct address, it's pretty easy to spell that out like they did for other cops, but not for her. They took care of her.
Now, just for the record, also, you were on the job almost a little longer than I was, a couple of years. Does the police department ever use jargon like rate jumping, or will they use their own term, which is insurance lapse?
Absolutely. Absolutely. They use their own terms.
So rate jumping is they're using a term to, like you said, it really appears as if they're hiding this. They're trying to shield this person.
Absolutely. Absolutely is what I believe. That there's just too much. There's when you see so many coincidences, it really spider sense starts tingling. Yeah. You know?
It's starting the stars are aligning that you formulated a theory, and the theory is actually starting to come in where you have something that is very questionable, probably criminal, and yet the police department is saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see anything. But hey, Officer Joe, who doesn't know anyone, we got to terminate him, make an example out of him. That's how it seems to me here. I think this is a good find, but there's more. So I'm going to pull up this other post. This is a post by Marlon. This is quite a coincidence. It's pretty hilarious. The song in the background, it's Good Times. So here we see, there's a video playing. I can't play the song, but the music in the background is Good Times. But play the full video here. This is the full video. As you can tell, that's Sergeant Kitchen Katori. I guess this is 2016. This is Brooklyn North own account, which is Jeffrey Madry was the assistant chief back then. And this links back to Jeffrey Madry, and it's a big club, and you aren't in it. So, what are you gonna tell us? Inform us here about what do you think with what's going on here with this? Because this is crazy.
Yeah. Well, this is part of the pattern you see of if you're in that big club, you're part of 1PP's nobility class, then the rules just don't apply to you. Okay. And the clues are all there that she was part of that big club, Again, her CO at the time in 2016 was Jeffrey Madry.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you follow her huge overtime, growth, I guess. And it matches Jeffrey Madry's rise to being deputy, to being, chief of department, So it's very curious that, that here we have somebody who again she's actually number 4, by the way, on the uniform overtimers. The overtime that you see me posting there is civilian and uniform. But when you look at it specifically uniform, she's number 4. So here you have somebody who's in an administrative position who happens to be number 4 in the department. So I mentioned this before, but prior to 2022, most of the guys on that list are guys who did details. They're guys who, like in K9, who would stand out there for hours. Guys, you have 1 year, which I believe is 2021, where like the entire Brooklyn North, like crime team or whatever they were calling it at that time, shows up on that list. And you look at their records, and it's guys who have like hundreds of colleges, guys who are out there working. So here you have a sergeant who's at least 100 names ahead of the nearest equivalent sergeant at a borough. She's in an administrative position, and she has an exorbitant amount of overtime, and she has connections to Jeffrey Madry. And there's some curious things going on with that charge that she has. But the charge was actually it was settled in 2022, by the way. So again, the rules don't apply to you if you're part of the nobility class.
That's correct. I think you're spot on here. And I do want to put a sidebar to the actual list that you're talking about, which we discussed actually on our last show together and also last week. There was an officer that was ahead of Lieutenant Epps on the list. His name, I believe, was Regal. He's a Transit 9 K9 guy. I actually spoke to him. Nice guy, 22 years on the job. So he had informed me that he was working in transit. He did his whole, almost majority of his career as a Brooklyn North cop. He had transferred to K9 in the last year or two, and he had his dog. So for whatever reason, the police department, what they did was they call it a stipend, where the dog's time and you have to sign the dog in and out. They put this on a paycheck, on a pay stub, with the officer whose responsibility is the dog, who now the dog's retired with Mr. Regal. That dog stipend, that time that they have, is put on overtime, yet he's not being paid in overtime. So what the police department itself screwed that one up. So I believe the real number was he made about 900 hours, but it's 900 hours of him, I don't know, being a fixer, like a certain detective in a chief of department's office, or driving Kaz Dawdry and playing video games with him at work. You know, it's not that kind of stuff. This guy was actually standing on a platform with his dog. And in fact, he was told he wasn't even allowed to make arrests, apparently, because they kept saying to him, you have too much overtime, even though at that time he wasn't capped. So these are the games these people play. They come down on a hard worker versus somebody who's part of the ring of cronyism / nepotism, which is what we're out here exposing. So that person, even though they're on the list, they really weren't on the list. But what's funny is the two IT techs that you mentioned from Brooklyn, I understand that they were working at Brooklyn North or in and around Jeffrey Madry as well. So the two people that actually made 2,000 hours and 1,900 hours, we believe, have ties back to Jeffrey Madry. So that's why they're on top of the list. So then again, so you're starting to see the patterns developing. But I just wanted to make sure we have a fact, because I don't want people dirtying up someone who clearly the police department should have never added these hours. And I guess this goes for everyone in K9. Make sure you look at your paychecks. Start telling, the police department and the city to stop doing that, because that's how you end up on the payroll rolls as if you made a ton of money, and you really didn't. You weren't even close. So next post I want to post is actually, I just spoke about the aforementioned Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Kaz Daughtry, who, I don't know, this guy is the king of social media, we'll say, perception management, like you like to state. And here's a post that you quote posted off of John Macari and Eric Dim on the Finest Unfiltered podcast. They originally had put, our taxpayers funding sponsored ads on official NYPD accounts. You posted, where can I find the line item for perception management in the fiscal year 2025 budget at NYPD PC? I have it on the screen. It says, it's clearly NYPD Daughtry. This is his official account, and it says sponsored. And it says, congratulations to Chief with this. I guess he's, praising John Schell, who's mired in investigations and controversies. We're about to get to that. But what are you trying to get at here? Because I've never seen this before. Can you explain this to the audience?
Well, I was simply referring to the budget. And obviously, if they have a sponsored ad, they're using money to pay for those ads on Instagram. So I'm curious, what exactly is the budget for that, and how deep the budget goes? Because if they're sponsoring ads on Instagram, I mean, what else are they paying for? Are they paying for bootlicker news to give good coverage? Are they paying for, what else are they paying? Which other PR companies, and is the next step to get influencers out there to praise the department and to gloss over all the negative aspects of that are going on at 1PD right now. But
is this ethical? In your opinion, is that even ethical to have sponsored ads? I mean, is this anything? I've never heard of this in my tenure in the NYPD, and we worked together in the same time, the same years, but not together. Yeah. Would you suspect? Have you ever heard of them saying, we're going to pay people to sponsor things for us online, or like in an online campaign, like trying to prop them up? Because I don't know if this is ethical or not, but I don't know. Do you need a prior approval for this? Because this has got to be in the budget, no? And got to be approved by city council. Where does this fall underneath that structure? Because I don't think this is, on the up and up, so to speak. I'm just asking like a taxpayer. How would this procedure even go, if you know about it?
I don't, and it's baffling, because here, it's unheard of for police department to be engaging in like PR, we're the police department, it's pretty simple. We fight crime, Here we're wasting budget on PR instead of allocating that to crime fight, This is part of I've said this before, that we seem to do everything nowadays except actual crime fighting, you go to the NYPD's Twitter, and it's all kinds of stuff. You see what we're speaking at social events that have nothing to do with policing. Can we get back to our actual mission? People, when people look at a police department, they don't want you to show up and give speeches at like social gatherings. They expect us to stand there and protect them so they can do speeches. It's like we're not the show. We protect the show. But this department seems to have their hand in everything and concerned with everything else. Social activism rather than actual policing. We're a police department. Let's go back to meat and potatoes like police. Can we do that? But it's like I posted up a couple days ago again about the overtime. And again, this is, you go past 2020 and you see the overtime. It's like doubled since prior to 2020. Now you could blame that on a lot of the stuff like the legislative irresponsibility and all the nonsense going on at the DA's office. But you see the atmosphere where that money tap seems to be stuck and open, and here we are just using money again for nonsense. Okay. When that should be allocated to just meat and potatoes police.
There's a lot of people who have contacted me saying exactly what you just said. They're going to now, other people will say that we're trying to be detractors and we're critics of Kaz Daughtry. I'm just telling you, as a person in the middle who actually worked in a police department, I have never seen like the way these guys up top go about it, where they're in front of the camera. It's like Marlon Bethel coined the phrase perception management. They want to control the narrative. John Schell said this so many times. Newsmax, wherever you go, wherever he's been, watch his interviews. He says it over and over again, controlling the narrative. They want to control the narrative and be in this perception management. People just want you to be a cop. They don't want to hear about stakeholders. All of a sudden, I remember John Schell's first mistake was he put out a judge's name that wasn't involved in the case that they were referring to. And then he talks about stakeholders. The only time you should even hear about things like that is, like you said, we remember it was through the DCPI office, which is the spokesperson or the police commissioner or the mayor. Here we have a guy in uniform, at the time the chief of patrol, and this guy, Kaz Daughtry, who now he's a deputy commissioner of operations. Before he was an assistant commissioner, then he was a detective. On paper, he's one rank. When he's getting paid, he's another. I don't know what that is all fugaziness going on there. And it's been exposed as well and probably being looked at right now internally, and also maybe an investigative body's looking at that with Kaz Daughtry. But I've never seen this, because it's police are supposed to just report public safety. And if I always thought, I don't know if you think that, I've heard this suggestion by people also, 4 X accounts basically, or 3, social media accounts. The precincts are allowed to post public safety, right? So the precinct accounts show you wanted posters, stuff like that. Then there's one that's the good side of police department. We have an event here. We did this here. Of course, don't be posting your criminal mob associate friends that you're hanging out with. You're not supposed to be doing that. And then, like the chief of department has a statement, or the police commissioner has a statement about public safety or travel advisory, stuff like that. Other than that, what the hell are we looking at? Because they admitted that they have over 280 social media accounts, and they didn't even know who's in control of that, Marlon. That was at a city council hearing. That was at one of those hearings they had where, they perjured themselves, like Tanya Kinsella has and Jeffrey Madry has. What is your take on that? 280 accounts. No one knows who's in charge. They can't tell you the person or the persons. They just, I don't know, randomly post things.
Yeah. Well, look, Carlos Nieves has one, and he was the assistant commissioner at DCPI. Why does he need one? You're not the head of DCPI. if you have information that you need to put out there, use the main DCPI account. Why do you need your own account for? But this is, again, it's like a lot of things. It starts out like a good idea, and I believe the department should have a Twitter. You go to Florida and you see a lot of sheriff's offices have a Twitter, but they have like one Twitter, maybe two at the most. They don't have the amount that we have. Like I said, it starts out as a good idea to give people the public access to what's going on in the department and to broadcast information to them. But it's become like they treat it like their own personal Twitter accounts. Like if they're a celebrity and they need to go virtue signal about some social cause that, again, has nothing to do with policing. It's something that's like gotten way out of hand, and it just further pushes us out of the realm of being a professional police department and to being like a PR arm of the mayor, or again, the party department,
So. I think, that's another one. I believe the Finest and Filtered podcast coined the party department. But I think you're harping on something that's very important, and people that are watching this, remember, social media, everything you're seeing is actually paid by New York City taxpayers. Those accounts are all government funded. So the question now is, are those ads that you just saw sponsored, is the taxpayer paying for it, and why? That is going to be the next question. If I'm council member Lincoln Wrestler, who's he is the Trey Gowdy of City Council, only he's the left wing, where there's a lot of bluster and then nothing. A lot of hot air, and there's never any action. So that's Lincoln Wrestler for you. I hope he's watching. Lincoln, please do your job. Ask these questions that these are taxpayers want to know these questions and answers. Answer it for the taxpayers and actually hold someone accountable. Don't just say it and then there's your one line to be on X and then, oh, look at me, I reelect me. There's too much of that, actually. I wouldn't expect anything less from that guy. So now I'm going to show you, this was something that I posted. This was, I believe, on Saturday or Sunday, there was an article in New York City about New York City's problem hiring cops. So New York Post had an article, and I decided to clip this part out of it. And I put, if you listen to legacy media, they parrot John Schell and Eric Adams, quote, narrative. New York City is safe, etc. If you follow at the Finest Cast, which is the Finest Unfiltered podcast, and the Sal Greco show, we lay out facts. NYPD doesn't even have 33,000 members on patrol. They count people running their time on the books as, quote, active. And it says right here, the article had said, desperately seeking NYC cops, NYPD applicants have plummeted as force tries to hire 1,600 officers. And right here it says, inspective members of New York's Finest went from 18,000 in 2017 to just 8,000 this year, a 55% decline, according to data from the the Police Benevolent Association, the city's largest police union, which is the PBA. So before I go to your own post, Marlon, what do you have to say about that in regards to that article?
Yeah. It shows you a lot of cops right now aren't telling their family members to go join the police department. And I myself would never tell any young person to join the PD right now, because there are other departments that'll treat you better and you'll have a better quality of life there. And New York City really needs to, we need to get a handle of this, because until we do, we're not going to get the best candidates out there. In fact, we might not even get the worst, because as you can see, we can't even fill seats anymore, And again, this goes back to the problem of morale and what's happening. And we need to get a handle on what's happening in order to get these candidates, get the best, most qualified candidates back into the department. And we have to, because as you can see, you'll see from my post, guys are running out the door.
Yep. I'm going to actually put that up as we speak right now. So Marlon, this was your post that you put up, and it's unbelievable. Marlon posted this in response to my own post. It said, a reasonable person would therefore conclude it prudent to slow the brain drain of experience fleeing the New York City Police Department. But this city doesn't consider it an issue that 67% of the department is so young, nor that we are in a recruitment crisis. And this is a chart he put, and he's stating here, Tier 2 blue equals cops hired January 2009 and before. Tier 3 orange equals cops hired July 2009 and after. Expect even more people exiting due to the amount of overtime they've made just off of subway details and protest overtime. So here is a chart. So maybe you could explain this a little better for the public, because I'm looking at it says uniform tier by fiscal year, and I see it says uniform 14, 15, 16, all the way to 24, and I see tier 2 and tier 3. So what are we looking at here?
Yeah. So what we're looking at right now is the makeup of the department. So in 2024, okay, just based off of the NYPD's own payroll data, and this is before we even parse it for people who they have on there that have already retired, and we're not even including people that are not on, people that are say sick or modified or whatever, that aren't on patrol. Okay, the department is nearly 67% of tier 3. Tier 3 are guys that came in after July of 2009. So these are fairly young guys on the job. Now that should be alarming to anybody, because, you know, we have squads that are very young. And when it comes to, say, investigating homicides and investigating, you know, doing a long-term case, you need that experience there, you know? And as the job loses more of the experienced detectives and this brain drain keeps happening, you're putting inexperienced guys in positions that there's nobody, the generation before them is not there to impart their experience and wisdom onto them. And that's only going to hurt the city more, you know?
I'm looking at this. What your chart is actually, so 2014, which I had 6 years on, I believe you had 8 years on. Mm-hmm. Our tier, which is what we belong to, tier 2, was 78%, over 78%. And 21% was tier 3, which was people after, way after us. Now, you fast forward this, I mean, it's almost every year. This is now dwindled down to 33% tier 2 and 67% almost tier 3, which would mean that everybody we know around us, we become, I mean, it usually happens through attrition, but there's all new cops that were taught a completely different way on the job in majority, which would probably lead you to believe what you're seeing sometimes in the street with these incidents has a lot to do with that, like why this happened. Like 67% of the job, the New York City Police Department is tier 3 and above. That's a higher number than it was 78% tier 2 just, 10 years ago. And in 10 years, it's drastically changed.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. Just in the span of 10 years, we've lost so much tier 2 guys. This is a problem. One of the problems the NYPD has always had is training. We're so big and it's so hard to properly train guys, these large classes that we certainly used to have, right? I came out and, I noticed there was the guy who was basically training my field training in Impact had 6 months ahead of me. So he himself didn't know, he knew maybe one or two things more than I did, right? So the NYPD has always had that problem. But this makes it even worse, because at least back then, the guys in crime had 10, 15 years more. And I can go and pick their brains about what to look for if I'm trying to stop a guy for a gun, Now you get the new generation tier 3, whose brains do they pick when there's so few guys, elder guys still left on the job, The guy who has 2 or 3 or 5 more years than him is still very inexperienced at the job,
This
I
is
was
crazy. This is crazy. And for folks out there understand, Marlon mentions crime. He mentions the anti-crime unit. That was street crime. There was also borough crime where there were special units assigned to each borough: Brooklyn North, Brooklyn South, Queens North, Queens South. Those units are all gone. They're now combined into what they call CRT. So you're looking at a completely different thing from back in that time. So
yes.
and then
So
this.
the crime. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying this. Now there's this other chart here, post 2020 NYPD overtime, and I could see here in 2018, I believe that was what 8 million, the blue uniform overtime, which was I guess people in uniform, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2019 around the same number, and then 2020 escalated obviously because they had the riots and all of that, so that was over 14 million. Then it was a drastic decrease 2021. Because I see the blue is the uniform. What's the orange color?
Civilians.
Civilians, okay.
Yeah.
And then the blue drastically now it went down 2022. It was almost at 14 million again. Then a little over I guess 11 million in 2023. Right now it's at closing in on 12 million for this year. That's post 2020. The NYPD overtime. I was on in 2018, 2019. I mean, that looked pretty steady, and now it's in the same neighborhood almost every year. What is your take on that?
Yeah, that's interesting because even though the overtime is actually down this year, you look at the top earners and they've earned almost double what they did 2 years ago. So it's curious. How is it that overtime is down and yet the top earners have earned a lot more? So that's all because the people at the top again are in the club, you know. So the tap was open up for them.
What actually you're pointing out is at the highest peak, which was 2020, where it was over 14 million. You had a little more parity where you didn't have these people that are tied to cronyism on top of the list with exuberant amount of hours. 2018, 2019 looks lower. So it looks like you got a little better parity. Now you're seeing, you made less overtime in 2024 as a job, as the entire department. But it's all the people up top that are eating from the trough there. And there's the regular workers getting, sandwich saying, no, you can't take from here. Only the big people up top. Is that kind of like what this looks like? That from looking at that chart, that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely. So in the year 2020, the top earner, which is actually an anomaly in itself, but I haven't gone down that rabbit hole, but that person had 2,400. He had 2,451 hours, right?
Oof.
And the number 2 guy had 1,596. Yeah. Which it's curious, but because that number 2 guy was doing a lot of protest overtime. Okay, that entire list was dominated again by guys who were working and who were out there doing details and out there on footposts. A lot of them in transit. But
versus
again, you get this year, and you see
versus the cronyism we're seeing today.
Yeah,
the chief of the department's office that never see the street, almost barely ever on the street, other than they're driving these people from one place to the other or just hanging out at one police plaza.
Yeah.
But now that we're bringing up on police plaza, one individual in particular here, we understand it was a flurry of activity this past Friday into Friday night at one police plaza. Some things that they're not going to be showing up officially and some things that are. And then there's this one big thing that apparently happened at this, like the 800-pound elephant in the room that happens to have 3 chins in my book. And that would be the one aforementioned current chief of department, John Schell. This is what I reposted off of Eric Dim. I'll start with Eric Dim posted first. Numerous credible sources rumored the command logs in John Schell's office have been confiscated at NYP One Police Plaza. Can anyone confirm? Is this true at NYPD Chief of Department? Everyone deserves due process. Is this misinformation or accurate? Perception and reality sometimes intertwine. # the finest unfiltered. And then Here is my post, because that same evening I had mentioned that there would be a bloodletting online. I mentioned it on a prior post to this. So, in the latest NYPD Friday night bloodletting, personnel from the chief of department office were transferred, as the current chief of department, John Schell, apparently had his old office swept today for items as he looked on with disdain. More news to come at, well, hashtag the Sal Greco. So, Marlon, what do you have to say for this? Or have you heard anything of what was written there between what I had said and what Eric Dimmer said about what happened on Friday?
No, I have nothing new to add to that, but it's interesting, you know, when you look at the overtime. I haven't posted it yet, but I'm gonna post it. It's the Patrol Services Bureau overtime, and his top guy had 1,448 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So let's you know, it wouldn't shock me that there was some manipulation going on with the codes used there and with the overtime as well. And like we were talking offline, right? That how we think, well, we wonder how long has this been going on? And like I brought it up because when I was doing my research, I came across an old article about Rodney Harrison again, right? So
Oh, yes.
for those of you who don't know, Rodney Harrison used to be our chief of department, and he left with Commissioner Shea as Eric Adams and his crew took over in 2022. But I thought it was kind of funny that Harrison, like the Suffolk County DA's office, what was it, a year ago, they raised allegations against him about finagling the time. Right?
Yes.
And
yes, they did.
Just earlier last year, 2024, they took no further actions against him. But the point is, Rodney Harrison left after 2 years of being their commissioner. So I'm curious, like, for how long they've been doing this. The reason why I also mention it is because years ago, the NYPD had a program where they would take officers from different precincts and station them at various counterterrorism posts that were supposed to be for counterterrorism using federal money. So the feds gave them money, and you'd think they put us in the subway, put us at like high value targets, right? Instead, 2 weeks before detectives Lou and Ramos were assassinated in Bed-Stuy on a corner next to a project which has nothing to do with terrorism. I was on that exact same corner on a terrorism post, right? So that's federal government paying counterterrorism dollars, but the city using those counterterrorism dollars for regular crime post. So, you know, you see the city has a pattern of finagling that federal money in things that really wasn't assigned for that, you know? So this doesn't really come as a shock to me, what's going on. It's just that maybe the bills are finally due, you know? And the city is just going to have to now account for all the finagling they've been doing all these years. And especially since the tap has been open once Ed Caban got there.
Yeah, that was party central with that guy. But to actually go back to what you're saying with this whole John Schell, incident that occurred on Friday, from what I'm understanding here, the entire chief of department office was transferred out. What I mean to say is they were the people that were transferred there to begin with under Jeffrey Madry. There was something that Lieutenant Epps had made in one of her allegations, I believe, whether it be through the New York Post or on her lawsuit. One of the things she was alleging, and she's been alleging constantly, was the transfers were not real transfers. They were not properly transferred because in the New York City Police Department, all transfers, anything personnel-wise, has to go through what we call a finest message, which if you've watched prior episodes on this show, I have produced. There was a finest message on Jeffrey Madry being suspended. There was a finest message on Chief Saraceno being modified. There was a finest message when Tariq Shepard was transferred from the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information Office to where he is now, the Interagency Office. There's always an official document in the police department. the transfers that were occurring with many of these cronies on the list that Marlon actually provided last time, and you could go and look at it again. These people, some were transferred, but never officially, meaning if they called the command, wherever they're from, if let's say they're in the first precinct, they call and there's a telephone message log, and it'll say, by authority of the chief of department, Officer so-and-so, Sergeant so-and-so has been transferred to the chief of department. That's fine and dandy. But there should be a finest message making this official, because they can't track the personnel, because they're showing up in one area as working in the first precinct, and then in another area they're saying, wait a minute, but they work in the chief of department's office. So if it's not official the first time when they were transferred, it's not official when they're transferred out. So that is why more than likely we haven't seen the finest message with numerous people that were transferred out. It happened on Friday. At the same time, John Schell shows up. They're rummaging, and I mean officials. I'm not quite sure if it's internal affairs, if it's the Department of Investigation with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, because I understand they also might have taken his electronics. They swept through the office. They were looking at command or post logs back 18 months. They wanted records. It's one of these investigating bodies, and John Schell appeared to seem as if he was attending his own funeral. So that is what occurred Friday at One Police Plaza. There's other transfers that are rumored to either be happening, and that's from the upper echelon, and it hasn't been made official, or they're still shuffling to see who's going to try to retire, and all of this is going on. But it's not official yet, again, because the finest messages haven't come out. So just for people to understand how the police department works, that's the scoop. That's what I understand. Of course, this is a brand new week. There should be more. But one more thing I want to add here before we go, another post from our good friend Sam Antar at whitecollarfraud.com and at Sam Antar on X. And he's exposing the chief of department's office. Here's his post. Did you know that in fiscal year 2023, the NYPD chief of department's office spending revealed a striking imbalance between regular salaries and overtime costs? For uniformed personnel, while $53.4 million went to full-time salaries, a staggering $532.1 million was spent on overtime, nearly 10 times more. The pattern continued with civilian staff, with $7.2 million covered full-time salaries, but overtime costs ballooned to $69.5 million, showing overtime expenses far outweighed regular payroll across both workforce categories. And he CC'd Jessica Tisch as the police commissioner and the current NYPD chief of department, which is John Schell. Marlon, what do you have to say about that stat?
Yeah, Sam is 100% right. You look at let's go back to the top 400 list, right? You look at some of the civilians up there. Again, remember the top two
two IT techs,
civilians from 911. And those civilians, they nearly tripled their salary off overtime. And they did hours. Now, I was a big overtime guy, but I worked for my overtime, And we're talking spending days in a precinct. And I would be tired, My days off, I'm like exhausted walking around with bags and then behind. So how in the world is possible to again, like the top earner, do 2,000 hours in a year is and not be like in the hospital is something that like I want to know. I want somebody to actually explain that to me. But Sam is 100% right, and he's 100% on target about what he's saying.
Marlon, I think you do an outstanding job. What you're doing is a service not only to the men and women of the police department, the ones that are working and standing on those platforms and out there, some of them working in like citywide traffic, having to direct traffic, even though civilians should be doing that. People like that, the precinct level people, they're all, applauding what you're doing because you're speaking for them. They're getting screwed over. And the people that are, tied to cronyism and nepotism, which we will unveil in the future. Some of the crazy nepotism transfers and stuff, and it's wild. There's wild things. By the way, Jeffrey Madry has a brother still working actively on the job. He works in, I believe, transit. So to be continued on all of this stuff. But Marlon, brother, where can people find you again? Let them know where's your X and your Instagram handles and what else is in the future for Marlon Bethel.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me on, Sal. So you guys can find me on Twitter. I'm at Fire Detective on Twitter. And I'll be around. I'll be on The Finest maybe this week. But you'll see me around. I'll most definitely hope to be back on Sal's show. And keep pounding, keep getting the message through that we need to change things. And we need to certainly get things right before the public actually gets angry about what's going on with stuff like the overtime. And we need to stop the hemorrhaging of officers. Like a side note, right? In my research, I happened to come across a detective, a first grader, who's actually in Manhattan North Homicide Squad. Now, what's great about that is that he's been here since 1983. So, that's experience. That's a ton of experience. That if you see that guy, you give him a shout out, because it's guys with experience like that I love, like, picking their brains and finding out trying to get them to impart that knowledge onto me. And it's guys like that who you're not going to find in the future again, and that's a shame. And it really hurts the job, and it'll hurt our reputation as being the greatest department in the United States. So, but thanks again for having me on, Sal, and you guys will see me around.
Marlon, it's always a pleasure. Folks, that wraps it up here. I'm sure it'll be another interesting week in New York City. And we'll be coming back with whatever we find, any new news. And if anything pops up, Marlon will be here. If he finds out anything, I'll bring him back right away. He is a favorite here. And with that being said, folks, thank you for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. I also appreciate all the new members and of the audience that are now tuning in. We're going to be here presenting facts. That's the axe of truth. They say we have an axe to grind. It's an axe of truth. So far, if you can't debunk me, you have to acknowledge me. I stole that one from Roman Reigns. And by the way, I want to give a shout out. I haven't said this yet. The Lifestyle Miami Chargers won the World Highlight League. You should check that out. I'll put it up on the screen. They won the championship. That's my friend's team. That's the team I actually root for. It's the second championship. So that's how the highlight season ended. There'll be a new one in a couple of weeks starting at Magic City Fronton for the spring 2025 season. And with that, I will see you on the next one. I bid adieu and farewell.